Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We are in the midst of the 4 stages of practice and 5 stages, or 4 stages of, my memory. Yeah, 4 stages of resolute mind and 5 stages of practice. And since we're dealing with divisions, I think it's pertinent. I have other videos and you've heard me talk about the concept of time before. But I had another insight recently and I wanted to share it with you as kind of a thought experiment. We read a lot about Buddhahood, what it means, what the Buddha means in terms of awakening, awareness, right? We have all these words we put around it. And there's a particular set of words we put around it. And ever since I started practicing Buddhism, I would hear or read and think, and then move on. I'll catalog that, and then I'll move on. What's more relatable to me? And so maybe for my own benefit, but I wanted to share with you this idea of past, present, and future. And the reason I want to talk about past, present, and future in relation to time is the statement that the Buddha, our Buddha-ness, has a perfect understanding of past, present, and future. And that always seemed bordering on the mystical to me. Because it seemed to suggest to me, anyway, that somehow awakening, Buddha nature, would present the past, whatever that is, in a whole different light. That suddenly everything that has happened to me, around me, for me, would seem to somehow come together, make sense. What does that mean, right? All these words. And so, I don't know, maybe it was talking to my 86-year-old mother. I think it had something to do, well, never mind where the insight came from. It may come to me yet as I speak to you. It was some YouTube videos I was watching, and this subject, once you gain an insight or you have a little aha moment, like, I see something different in what they're saying there. You suddenly start to see it everywhere. I swear you could see it in a car commercial. I mean, it's just, once your eye opens to some kind of particular understanding, you start to see it everywhere. And so this, what happened recently, is it occurred to me that the way we experience time to a modern human, whether you're 16 or 66 or 96, we experience time, as you know as a Buddhist, moment to moment. It's a moment-to-moment fragmentation that happens like in geometry when you build a line. A line is a locus of points. A line is not a thing in itself. It's a construct of minuscule points in space. And remember, points they're a location. A point is a location. It's not a thing. When you make a dot on a piece of paper, that's not a point. We use it that way, but that's a dot. That's different than a point. A dot is a thing, and it's located somewhere, and that's a point. It's a location. So it's interesting that for our modern minds, being surrounded by science and technology all the time, we sort of we've evolved to kind of just take that for granted. We think that way. Even if we don't dissect it that far, Buddhism certainly does, that's very different than what 2,700 years ago people thought, or 1,000 years ago what people thought. The idea that we see time as linear, as this thing that happens over a space of distance, a time. But we know now that that's not accurate, that time is a continuum, but even the word continuum has changed. See, continuum sounds like a solid trajectory, but it's just these minute locations one after another. And that's so important for us to understand when it comes to Buddhism. Because if you really think about that, this moments, really to say this moment is inaccurate. Because in the time it takes, the distance that it takes from me articulating this moment is actually innumerable moments, one after the next. They just all sort of transfer. Think of it like, see, something you didn't have 1,000 years ago was a modem or a data connection on your telephone, on your cell phone, your smartphone, or your computer, right? Even if you're 86 years old right now, like my mother, she understands that there are ones and zeros in there. She has no concept of how that works. She just knows that her computer does stuff for her. But if you talk to her about, not a database, but yeah, even a database or an array of numbers. She thinks in terms of the only thing she's had exposure to in her modern life as a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. She puts numbers in place and formulas, and she understands all of that. But what she can't drill down to that level of packets of ones and zeros arranged in groups of 8 or 16 or 32 that are sent to your cell phone and assembled in your cell phone to make a pixel of a big picture. Like when you watch television, that signal is actually billions of signals being sent in chunks, encoded and decoded at either end, to then assemble into a mess of electrons to give you something that resembles something so that you can see it as something, right? I mean, this minutia of thinking. We tend not to think that way. We tend to think in general sweeps of information, right? But if you talk to a physicist or a chemist or a nuclear chemist or even a biologist, when you start talking, and we throw around the word DNA and genetics as these they are huge, large concepts that we abstract as a thing, but truly, when you start digging into them, they're made of such minute, discrete things that science is still trying to dig into foundational stuff. So if you think of thinking that way, if you think of memory that way, if you think of self that way, the constructs that we have on this very high order of I or stuff or DNA, we're starting to dig into it. That if you could dig into the minutia deep enough, your understanding of what stuff is, self is, ego is, car is, this desk, this video is, there would be scarcely any difference, because foundationally, moment to moment, this assemblage of energies at a very high level is what we think our experience of life is. Stay with me here, because this is core Buddhism. To make the statement, perfect understanding of past, present, and future, doesn't happen in the past, it doesn't happen in the future, it doesn't even really happen in the now. It is happening from moment to moment. And try to wrap your head around that in a way where each moment you are thinking with this human brain and human mind that this is a moment is actually tens of thousands of moments assembling into something that we cognate. And now for a moment, think of reaching a point in your awareness, in your awakening, in your Buddha-ness, where when we say this moment, our Buddha-ness actually conjures the unfathomable amount, uncountable amount of energies manufacturing this experience of the now. Then the past and the future, they're irrelevant as labels, because the past and the future are occurring in this assemblage of moments. Because this moment, it reflects the previous moments and is remember I say motion all the time, right? Is kinetically, momentumly, made up a word, experienced in this moment. We are constructing actively the next moment. So past, present, and future all take place in this exact, precise, minute fury of activity of this moment to the next, and from the past moment to the next. It all happens right now. Right now, right now, right now. To be able to think in that way, now I finally understand perfect understanding of past, present, and future. I understand it conceptually, I should say. But to operate with that awareness, that seems truly amazing to me. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about our Buddha-ness, reaching that stage of this roiling mass of energies in and around us, because it's all self, right? Actively assembling, manifesting, and projecting our momentum, our perception of the very momentum of life that we have a unique lens to. That's just so immense. So these attempts by Nichiren, like this Gosho here, that try to dissect that idea like 800 years ago, to the mind of people 800 years ago who don't even know, can't even project an idea of an email, let alone texting. And truly, I mean, you can't put yourself there, but you can begin to imagine it. This is the way he was trying to bring those people to an understanding. What is it to have resolve? What does a resolute mind look like? And how do we practice to develop it? Certainly there are stages of development, just like there have been in Buddhism throughout. And today, we don't send our 10-year-old kid to university. We send them to elementary school. And then to the next step, and the next step, and the next step, right? To develop their capacities. Well, in Buddhism, you're here now. This is the capacity for Lotus Sutra, for Myoho Renge Kyo. All right, back to the Gosho. Just a thought experiment for you to consider. So here we go with the question and answer device for teaching. Nichiren writes, question, what proof can you offer to support your claim? Answer, Volume 6 of Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, persons who are saved by the teachings preached previous to the Lotus Sutra are those who have reached a high level of attainment. The reason is because these teachings are mere expedients. Those saved by the perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra belong to a low level of attainment because this teaching represents the truth. Remember where we left off before, is that if you are already cultivated your capacity for Buddha-ness, your enlightenment, then it doesn't take much for you to deepen it and reach it in order for you to attain your Buddha way. The teachings, though they need to be sound, they don't have to be that detailed or minute in order for you to grasp and use them toward your attainment. But in this defiled age, this time of preoccupation with every sort of distraction that easily takes us away from focus on our Buddha-ness, our entitled enlightenment. Although we're entitled to it, but we have to work for it, right? Not entitled in the sense that you just snap your fingers. Anyway, this has to be a very powerful teaching in order to cut through all of that distraction and attachment and awaken you. The annotations on the Great Concentration and Insights comments on this as follows. Quote, this passage concerning the teachings preached previous to the Lotus Sutra, to Myoho Renge-kyo, makes clear the relative worth of the provisional and the true teachings, because it indicates that the truer the teaching, the lower the stage of those it can bring to enlightenment. Conversely, the more provisional teachings, or the teaching, the higher must be the stage of those who embrace it in order to attain enlightenment. And Volume 9 on the words and phrases says, in determining a person's stage of attainment, the more profound the object of meditation, the lower will be the level of the practitioner who can attain enlightenment thereby. So it's important to understand, and when they say the lower the level of practitioner, they're not saying that we're dumber. They're not saying that we're less capable. What this is talking to is the reach of the teachings. The number of people who can attain enlightenment with the provisional teachings, in other words, was a very small number. But with the Lotus Sutra, the one vehicle, Myoho Renge-kyo, anyone, no matter how brilliant or however, whatever gauge you want to use, whatever their life condition, can attain enlightenment with this. That's what they're saying. Don't misunderstand. I will say nothing here about followers of other schools, but why would scholars of the Tendai school set aside this interpretation that, quote, the truer the teaching, the lower the stage, end quote, and instead accept the writings of a supervisor of monks, Eshin, the teachings of Shanwu Wei, Chinkan Chi, and Pukun, and those of Chikaku and Chisho can wait until later. This is a matter of utmost importance, the most important in the entire land of Jampodvipa, in the whole world. Thinking persons should listen to what I say. After that, if they wish to reject me, we'll let them do so. Question. For practitioners in the latter day of the law who have just aroused the aspiration for enlightenment, what types of practice are restricted? Interesting. So what shouldn't we do? Answer. Such persons are restricted from practicing almsgiving, the keeping of precepts, and the others of the 5 paramitas, and are directed to chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo exclusively. So, if you're one of those people who likes to experiment with things because you don't want to really dedicate yourself to any one practice, so I'll try a little bit of that kind of meditation, or I'll try a little bit of, I'll just offer up my time and go to an ashram and just do that for a while, and that'll help me attain enlightenment. Or maybe, maybe this kind of yoga will do it, or maybe this or that, and you like to experiment and jump around. Well, basically what you're doing is you're succumbing to your addictions, your attractions, your distractions, basically, because you're not focused. It's really obvious when we talk about it this way, right? But for some people, they think, or they like to tell themselves, that if I do a little bit of everything, certainly that'll work. That's like, talk to a cook about that. That's like throwing in bell peppers with eggs and a half pound of sugar will make a delicious food that'll be both nutritious, dessert, appetizer, and main course all in one. No. Learn how to cook. Okay? This practice corresponds to the capacity of persons at the stage of producing even a single moment of belief and understanding, and, quote, rejoicing on hearing the Lotus Sutra, end quote. It represents the true intention of the Lotus Sutra. Just chant. That is as sure a way of awakening or attaining your Buddha-ness. There is no other. Everything else is distraction. And this is what Nichiren is saying. Question. I have never before heard such an assertion. It astonishes my mind and makes me wonder if my ears have not deceived me. Please clearly cite some passage of scriptural proof and kindly explain. Okay. Valid question. Answer. The sutra says, quote, such persons need not for my sake erect towers and temples or build monks' quarters or make the 4 kinds of offerings to the community of monks. Remember, I've talked about monasteries before. It's an old practice that's not suitable for people of today. It doesn't produce benefits. It's just a distraction. This passage from the sutra makes it quite clear that practitioners who have just aroused the aspiration for enlightenment are restricted from almsgiving, the keeping of precepts, and the others of the 5 paramitas. So you don't have to private yourself on the foods you eat. You don't have to, the paramitas are all about behavioral rules. The guide for your behavioral rules is in being a good practitioner of Myoho Renge Kyo, treating others with respect as you would yourself. See, everything becomes self-causal in Myoho Renge Kyo. I've said it in this way, you'll understand, because I've said this many times. No one can hand you your Buddhism. No one can say, this is our Gohonzon, this is our mandala, so it's better than all those others, because blah, 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 blah. There is only one mandala, the one that Nichiren inscribed. This one. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo down the center. There's no other signatures, no other monks, no other dates. It's Nichiren's Gohonzon. It's a pure document of his encapsulation of the teachings of the Lotus Sutra atop all previous teachings. That's why it's a focal point, to enliven that which we already know, our Buddha nature. It's already here. It's yours. Nobody can give it to you other than yourself. Nobody can walk away from it other than yourself. Yourself being your samsaric manifestation. This is why we experience Buddhahood in this life, in this samsaric human state. Nowhere else can we experience it. We don't die and go to it. We don't come from it. We experience it here as a human being. And it's our responsibility, uniquely. That's a shitload of responsibility stacked on your shoulders. But isn't that wonderful? Because nobody else can take it away from you. Nobody can color it. Nobody can, although they try, right? That's authoritarianship. These organizations that mount these huge campaigns act as though they're imbuing you with enlightenment. They're giving you the tools. No, it's your choice. It's your enlightenment. Don't let them do that to you. You don't owe them anything. You owe yourself, and yourself is your environment. So think of it that way. If I want my mother to become enlightened, it's up to me to do so. I can't force her to do it. I can tell her about it, of course. She wants to know what her son is doing. But it will be in her witnessing of my awakening that she will become, what's the words here? Produce even a single moment of belief and understanding. That's how I enlighten my mother, through my own actions, for my own enlightenment. Not by telling her to do so. That doesn't do anything. Question. The passage you've just quoted restricts us only from erecting temples or towers or providing for the community of monks. It says nothing about keeping of the various precepts and the other practices. How argumentative is that? Answer. The passage mentions only the first of the 5 paramitas, that's that of almsgiving, and skips mention of the other 4. Question. How do we know this? Answer. Because a subsequent passage, in describing the 4th stage of practice, goes on to say, quote, how much more is this true of those who are able to embrace this sutra and at the same time dispense alms, keep the precepts, and so on and so forth, end quote. The sutra passages clearly indicate that persons at the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd stages of practice are restricted from practicing almsgiving, the keeping of precepts, and the other of the 5 paramitas. Only when they reach the 4th stage of practice are they permitted to observe them. And because such practices are permitted only at this latter stage, we may know that for persons in the initial stages, they're restricted. So you can only become unrestricted by these rules by attaining your own enlightenment. And then, you'll be operating from an enlightened place. So there are no rules. You can do whatever you like. Because you will do it from the right source, from the right intent, the right attitude. Question. The sutra passages you've just quoted seem to support your argument, but when you offer any passage from the treatises, or can you offer any passages from the treatises or commentaries? Well, I just gave you the comments of the Buddha's own words. Now you want other people's words to justify it? Man, you're stubborn. Answer. What commentaries would you like me to cite? Are you referring to the treatises by the 4 ranks of sages of India? Or to works written by Buddhist teachers of China and Japan? In either case, it amounts to rejecting the root and searching among the branches, seeking the shadow apart from the form, or forgetting the source and prizing only the stream. You would ignore a sutra passage that is perfectly clear and instead seek an answer in the treatises and commentaries. But if there should be some later commentary that contradicts the original sutra, would you then cast aside the sutra and follow the commentary? Yeah, I would have responded the same way. Nevertheless, I will comply with your wishes and cite some passages. What the heck? In volume 9 of the Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra, it stated, quote, there is a danger that a beginner will be led astray by subordinate concerns, and that this will interfere with the primary practice. Well, there it is. Distractions. The beginner should directly give all his attention to embracing this sutra. That is the highest type of offering. If one sets aside formal practices but maintains the principle, then the benefits will be many and far-reaching. It's like, an example I would give is if you've ever flown on a commercial airliner. And if you haven't, this example will make sense to you. If there's a sudden loss in cabin pressure, you're at 30,000 feet, the air's so thin up there that you would die. You couldn't breathe it. So the cabin has to be pressurized so that you have breathable air. If for some reason that system fails and you don't have breathable air, these oxygen masks will drop from above you, from the dashboard above you. And it's a clear mask. You put it on and it's piped in pressure oxygen from tanks that will take over from that system while the plane then lowers to regain pressure in the cabin. But that oxygen is your key to surviving that event. It's oxygen for you to breathe. Now, the question comes, if you have a child, how does the child know to put this mask on? You, its parent, have to do that, right? But here's the key. You must, and these are in the instructions, you must put that mask on yourself first. Because if you do not, you run the risk of falling unconscious and dying before you can ever manage to get that mask on your child. Do you see? Unless you first ensure your breathing, you are no good to your child or children or others. You can't help them because you're going to die. So if you want to see people in your lives work toward their enlightenment, work toward their Buddha nature, their Bodhisattva nature, see them attain enlightenment, you cannot possibly do it without putting that enlightenment on yourself first. Does that make sense? Now, if your focus is to attain your own enlightenment, and out of appreciation you want to help others, that's different. That's different. If you want to support the tools that are helping you attain your own enlightenment, that's different. But if your distraction is, if I do enough of this other, I will attain enlightenment, that's incorrect. You're getting in your own way. Do you follow? In this passage of commentary, subordinate concerns refers to the 5 paramitas. Isolating yourself in a monastery and those kinds of things, though they may seem attractive, are just that. They are attractions taking you away from your focus. Let me ask you, this room I've set up here, this altar, this space of devotion to my practice, is this not a monastery? My own personal monastery? Even it is secondary to the fact that I have a mandala inscribed by Nichiren that I use as a focal point for my human mind to transgress itself, transformate itself into my Buddha nature. Isn't this ultimately, this body, my monastery? Think about that. If the beginner tries to practice the 5 paramitas at the same time that he embraces the Lotus Sutra, that may work to obstruct his primary practice, because you're too distracted in upholding all of these other things instead of purely focusing on Myoho Renge Kyo, which is a resolute mind. The primary practice is a resolute mind. How can you be resolute in something if other things are preoccupying you? Such a person will be like a small ship that is loaded with wealth and treasure and sets out to cross the sea. Both the ship and the treasure will sink. And the words should directly give all his attention to embracing this sutra do not refer to the sutra as a whole. They mean that one should embrace the daimoku, or the title, or the sutra exclusively, and not mix it with other passages. Even recitation of the entire sutra is not permitted, because there's too much distraction in that. You get lost in all the stories. They're good support, but they're not the practice. How much less are the 5 paramitas? Myoho Renge Kyo. That is the practice. To, quote, set aside formal practices but maintain the principle means that one should set aside the keeping of the precepts and the other formal practices of the 5 paramitas and embrace the principle of the daimoku exclusively. When the commentary says that the benefits will be many and far-reaching, it implies that if the beginner should attempt to carry out various other practices and the daimoku at the same time, then all benefits will be completely lost. Where are we time-wise? Yeah, I think I'm going to drop that off there. Yeah, I'll go a little further because I see what yeah, he just goes on and on. Words and phrases continues, he says, quote, question, if what you say is true, then upholding the Lotus Sutra is the foremost among all the precepts. Why then, in describing the 4th stage of practice, does the Lotus Sutra speak about one who can keep the precepts? Answer. This is done in order to make clear, by contrast, what is needed at the initial stages. One should not criticize persons at the initial stages for failing to observe requirements that pertain only to the latter stages. So when you're first starting out and you're learning, it's entirely appropriate that you study. That's one of the 3 primary pillars, right? You have to study. You have to know what it is you're committing to. But once you start committing to it exclusively, you shouldn't bother with all this extraneous stuff that pulls you away from your fundamental practice. If you do it as an adjunct, that's different. The scholars of today, ignoring this passage of commentary, would place ignorant people at the latter age in the same category as the 2 sages, Nahui and Tendai, a most grievous error. See, those are very studied people. They deepen their understanding of the meaning of the sutras and therefore the depth of understanding of Myoho Renge Kyo, ultimately. You have to be able to raise somebody, yourself, to that level of commitment. So that may seem like a mixed message, but hold that thought. Miao Lo further clarifies the matter as follows. Question, if that is so, then is there no need to construct actual towers to house the Buddha's relics, and is there no need to formally keep the precepts? And further, is there no need to provide alms for monks who carry out formal practices of the 6 paramitas? That's an important qualifier right there. Not just any monk, but monks who uphold the paramitas. See, that would be an older provisional form of Buddhism, not valid for today. So be careful here. Providing alms for monks is a good thing, provided it supports your focused practice on Myoho Renge Kyo. If it supports monks who are still talking about provisional practicing, you are being dissuaded and distracted from your Buddha-ness. The great teacher Dengyo declared, quote, I have forthwith cast aside the 250 precepts. And the great teacher Dengyo was not the only one to do so. Nyoho and Dochu, who were disciples of Ganjin, as well as the monks of the 7 major temples of Nara, all in like manner cast them aside. They understood that those teachings are no longer relevant. Moreover, the great teacher Dengyo left this warning for future ages, quote, if in the latter day of the law there should be persons who keep the precepts, and that's the 250 precepts. See, precepts is a word that's used in many places here. That would be something rare and strange, like a tiger in the marketplace. Who could possibly believe it? Question. Why do you not advocate the meditation on the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, but instead simply encourage the chanting of the Daimoku? And if you'll understand that 3,000 realms in a single moment or thought moment, that's a Tendai teaching. Answer. The 2 characters that comprise the name Japan contain within them all the people and animals and wealth in the 66 provinces of the country without a single omission. When you say Japan, you are saying everything that is Japanese, right? Including the country, the ocean, everything. And the 2 characters that make up the same name India, do they not likewise contain within them all the 70 countries of India? Miao Lo says, quote, when for the sake of brevity one mentions only the Daimoku or the title, the entire sutra is by implication included therein. He also says, quote, when for the sake of brevity we speak of the 10 worlds or the 10 factors, the 3,000 realms are perfectly encompassed therein. End quote. When Bodhisattva Manjushri and the Venerable Ananda came to compile all the words spoken by the Buddha, Shakyamuni, at the 3 assemblies during the 8 years in which the Lotus Sutra was preached, they wrote down the title Myoho Renge Kyo. And to show their understanding that the entire sutra is contained in these 5 characters, they proceeded with the words, this is what I heard. Right? That's why when you read sutras, thus I have heard, this is what I have heard. Myoho Renge Kyo, this is what I have heard. That's the format of every chapter of the Lotus Sutra, right? Question. I don't want to run too long here. One more. If a person simply chants Namo Myoho Renge Kyo with no understanding of its meaning, are the benefits of understanding thereby included? Good question. A question many of us have asked, right? Answer. When a baby drinks milk, it has no understanding of its taste, and yet its body is naturally nourished. Whoever took the wonderful medicines of Jivaka, knowing of what they were compounded, water has no intent, and yet it can put out fire, in fact, shape rocks, right, as we know. Fire consumes things, and yet how can we say that it does so consciously? This is the explanation of both Nagarjuna and Tendai, and I am restating it here. Why do you say that all teachings are contained within the Daimoku? Man, this is meaty stuff. I can't stop. Answer. Chang'an writes, quote, hence, Tendai's explanation of the title in the preface conveys the profound meaning of the sutra. The profound meaning indicates the heart of the text, and the heart of the text encompasses the whole of the theoretical and essential teachings. End quote. And Miao Lo writes, quote, on the basis of the heart of the text of the Lotus Sutra, one can evaluate all the other various teachings of the Buddha. So this is stating in another way what I've said many times before, that the Lotus Sutra sits atop the scholarship of all of Buddhism. That to understand the Lotus Sutra is to understand the entirety of Buddhism. all of Shakyamuni's teachings. Though muddy water has no mind, it can catch the moon's reflection and so naturally become clear. When plants and trees receive the rainfall, they can hardly be aware of what they are doing, and yet they do not proceed to put forth blossoms. And yet do they not proceed to put forth blossom. The 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo do not represent the sutra text, nor are they its meaning. They are nothing other than the intent of the entire sutra. So even though the beginners in Buddhist practice may not understand their significance, by practicing these 5 characters, they will naturally conform to the sutra's intent, which is the Buddha way, Bodhisattva way, attain enlightenment, awaken. All right. With that, I'm going to stop because I'm just, I'm getting so motivated here. All I want to do is turn around and chant. So just as a tantalizer, the next Gosho will start with question. When your disciples, without any understanding, simply recite with their mouths the words Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, what level of attainment do they reach? I'm going to like to hear his answer on that one. This turns out to be a very meaty Gosho, doesn't it? Because it covers all of the questions that the beginning practitioner has. And for many, even an intermediate practitioner. And by that I mean somebody who's done a lot of studying and is still chanting, but maybe with doubts. And I think this Gosho really, really talks to you guys, myself included. You know, I've gone through many stages in my practice. It's natural. Anyway, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for myself, but none of us were born enlightened, as might be possible mythology, although we had less distractions when we came out of the womb. Even in the womb, I think we were firmly entrenched in our samsaric existence and preoccupied with many things. So, with that, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, take care of your health, chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.